Welcome, Pewter Report readers, viewers, and listeners, to a brand new edition of the Pewter Report podcast, Energized by Celsius. We have our second episode of the week, and it could be just the best one yet. We had a Hall of Fame podcast yesterday on Monday's show. We're putting it up in the Pewter Report Ring of Honor because we were joined by Bucs left tackle Donovan Smith. So that was an awesome show. We will try to top it again today. And Scott, I'm very confident that we will. I'm your host, Matt Matera, and as I just mentioned, joined with me is SR Scott Reynolds. Scott, how are you doing on this Tuesday?
I'm doing good, Matt. Apologize not having a great hair day. Just got back from the gym.
Look fine.
Well, it's not up to my standards, but I'm going to make up for it by delivering with you the best Pewter Report podcast ever. So if you're tuning in, you're one of the lucky ones to hear this and view this podcast. So that's pretty good. The other thing that's good is I had a great workout. Towed off. It didn't take a shower, but I towed off about half an hour ago. The Celsius Heat. I don't have a can because I threw it away, but Celsius Heat. JC was rocking one of those the other day, and it's the creamsicle flavor was what powered my workout today, and that's what energizes this show, folks. Is Celsius. If you haven't had a chance to try Celsius, we're not going to hold it against you. Maybe you're new. Maybe this is your first Pewter Report podcast. You haven't heard us talk about Celsius on the regular. Yeah. Well, the reason why we talk about them on the regular is they're the title sponsor of the Pewter Report podcast. And folks, they give us the energy, not just for this particular show, but when you need a pick-me-up in the morning, it can replace coffee. If you need an afternoon pick-me-up at work, if you need a pre-workout drink, Celsius is the go-to, folks. What are you rocking there today, Matt?
I got the sparkling cucumber lime, quickly rising up the ranks. Yeah. A very, very nice taste. A little bit different. Obviously, Celsius has a lot of fruit flavors, whether it's the sparkling watermelon or the kiwi guava. Obviously, a lot of the tropical vibes as well. But the important thing with Celsius that you should know is it has 7 essential vitamins. It gives you that energy you need to get through your day. If you're doing a workout like Scott is, if you have a busy work day and you gotta keep the synapses buzzing the whole entire time, Celsius is there for you with that essential energy. And there's no crash after.
That's right.
That's the big thing with energy drinks. No sugar. That's why you're not crashing, because there's no sugar. So make sure you go to Amazon and you can order shipments there. Save $5. And you can set up when you want to have them sent to your house. You can set it up every 2 weeks, 3 weeks, whatever you want. Celsius is there for you. Or go to Celsius.com, hit the store locator, because they are all over the place. Tons of different flavors and the essential energy that you need. So shout out to Celsius for being the sponsor.
Yeah, man, I ordered a bunch of Celsius during Amazon Prime Deal days, and I'm literally getting a shipment, like a box every day of Celsius. I ordered like close to $200 for the Celsius. I'm like well stocked. But yes, the cucumber lime, which is what Matt's rocking. You've seen me probably rock the cola flavor. They're great change-ups if you don't like the fruit flavors. So we're going to do a little bit of a change-up today on the Pewter Report podcast. We're going to be talking about the Bucs' biggest obstacles right now.
Yes.
The easy thing is we could say injuries, right? Because that's what kind of befell the Buccaneers last year to a degree. They still went 13-4, Matt, despite having a revolving door, a carousel, if you will, in the secondary, mostly at the cornerback position. Their safeties, whether it's Mike Edwards' suspension, whether it's Antoine Winfield, missing some time. The secondary was really hit hard. And of course, we saw at the end of the season, not just Tristan Wirfs, but also Josh Wells at the right tackle spot were banged up for that Rams game and the Eagles game as well. And Ryan Jensen playing with a hip flexor issue, on hip flexor for a good deal. So yes, the injuries are a factor that they can mess with the team's season. The Bucs went 8-2 at home. Here's my point, and I'll let you get to it as well. The thing with the injuries is, if you look at the Bucs' 2 Super Bowl seasons, in 2020, the only starter that was out with a season-ending injury, or out for that game, mind you, was right guard Alex Kappa. And Aaron Stinney filled in quite well. And then you could say, well, O.J. Howard was another contributor. He was a, maybe 2/3 on the depth chart, having a good year that year, but Rob Gronkowski was the clear one, and O.J. and/or Cam Brate was the 2. But, I mean, that was it. And go back to 2002 for you old-timers. Booker McFarland, the nose tackle, the only starter on IR. So that's the recipe for success. But the problem, Matt, is the Bucs can't control the injuries. They either happen or they don't.
Right. And that's kind of the point I want to make as we get into this show is as we talked about the title of this episode is the Bucs' biggest obstacles. And yes, injuries are an obvious one, but that's not specific to the Bucs. That goes for every team around the NFL.
Right.
If a majority of your starters or your key top-notch, top-level players are injured, you're screwed. All right. Yeah. There's no, there's no two ways about it. So injuries, that affects every single team. For the Bucs specifically, we're talking about things that are really going to impact the 2022-2023 Tampa Bay Buccaneers and see what happens with them. And I think, at least for some of the things that come to mind for me, for the Bucs specifically, I think a lot of it comes down to, you'll see a running theme of there is a reliance on certain players to develop and a reliance on certain positions to really step up.
Yeah.
And if everything goes to plan, the Bucs will be fine. But if a couple of these positions that we'll talk about today, if they don't live up to what we expect them to do, then the ship could sink a little bit in that factor. I think just starting off here, obviously we had Donovan Smith on the show yesterday, so offensive line has been on my mind. One of the biggest storylines going into training camp, and we'll talk about this a little bit more next week because training camp is coming up. I'm very excited. The left guard position. Mm-hmm. Obviously, it's a very exciting competition with Aaron Stinney and Luke Gedeke and Nick Leverett and Robert Hainsey. One of those players, or maybe someone else, could end up winning that starting left guard job. Someone's going to have to. They're not just going to not have a left guard there. But, if Gedeke, for example, if he wins that position, the Bucs struck gold a couple seasons ago when Tristan Wirfs, they drafted him in the first round, obviously a little bit different with Gedeke. But, they got a little bit lucky. Obviously, they did their due diligence, and it was a great draft pick getting Tristan Wirfs, hopefully future Bucs Ring of Honor member and Pro Football Hall of Famer. But for Gedeke, again, you can't expect him, if he's going to win the starting job, to go and just become the next Tristan Wirfs, but at left guard. Like, you're putting a lot of eggs in that basket of trusting a rookie that's never played there before. Aaron Stinney, I think we'll all say, is the leader in the clubhouse there. Yeah. Stinney, obviously very formidable in the postseason run when the Bucs won the Super Bowl, and he's had playing time. He's been plugged into situations when other offensive linemen get hurt, but he's never really played an entire 17-game season going into the playoffs.
Yeah,
he took over when Tampa got later into the season. So that could be another effect. And the offensive line, they always say you're always as strong as your weakest link. And obviously this team is talented. This roster is very talented. And the offensive line, I think we're expecting even bigger things than what we saw from last year. And it's already a really good offensive line. But if that left guard position struggles going into this season with some of the opponents that they face, it's going to limit the Bucs running the ball, which obviously they want to improve on this year. And if they can't run the ball, I understand they like to go vertical as it is in the offense that Byron Leftwich likes to call, but the Bucs can't become predictable. I think that's the big thing. And that's kind of a little bit of the issue that Byron Leftwich has gotten into before, is people, including ourselves, have shaken our fist and hit the table being like, stop running these first down runs right up the middle. Pass it on first down, or I don't know, run a sweep, like do something a little bit different. So I think the lack of play at the left guard, and this is an if, like they could be all good, all set, good to go. But if that position in particular, if it doesn't pan out with this competition, it really could be a detriment to the Bucs for their ultimate goal of winning the Super Bowl. I think they could still get by, make the playoffs, but we're talking about winning another Super Bowl.
And Matt, I think you're spot on a couple points here. The first one I'll point out is you mentioned the vertical passing game. Okay, so there's some smoke routes, wide receiver screens involved in the Bucs passing game. We see that, right?
Yes.
But this is Bruce Arians / Byron Leftwich / Tom Brady's offense, and they want to take the deep shots when they're there. And they put in the game plan, deep shots, right, all throughout the game plan, and they want to take him and be opportunistic there. That requires time in the pocket, and you
Yes.
got to hold up in pass protection, right? So you're spot on there with your analysis about the vertical passing game. The other good point you made is, and I want to just kind of explain to fans. They sit there and say, and you and I probably feel the same way. Well, holy smokes, man! Between Aaron Stinney and Luke Gedeke and Robert Hainsey and maybe Nick Leverett, I mean, holy smokes, they got 3 or 4 guys there that that they can probably play. I'm sure they'll find one, right? The odds are in their favor that they're going to find one guy.
Yeah.
Here's where that can unravel, right? You start maybe with Aaron Stinney. If Gedeke or Hainsey, who don't have any real playing time, I think Hainsey played 30-some snaps, mostly at center last year, in very spot duty in games the Buccaneers had already won. So he got some garbage time reps. And remember, Hainsey also missed all of the preseason outside of the last game.
Yes.
Right? So in terms of actual bullets flying in games, he hasn't played a whole bunch. Gedeke is a rookie, hasn't played any. So if Stinney goes out there and struggles, let's say he wins the starting job but struggles, right? So now they're going to turn the page on Stinney, and they're going to go with either Gedeke or Hainsey or maybe Nick Leverett, one of those 3 guys. If that person doesn't come up, and none of those guys have a lot of experience, so Stinney's got the experience, but maybe physically, athletically, he's not the guy. Well, you put the other guys in, and listen, Gedeke, I think, is ultimately going to be the guy. I think you and I would agree with that. At some point in time, this year, next year, the plan is for him to replace Sally Marpet. But the problem is, if an experience shows up and these guys are missing blocks, missing some,
assignments,
et cetera, especially with twists and stunts, and Tom Brady's getting hit up the middle, okay, then all of a sudden you're going to see a revolving door at left guard trying to find the guy. It's going to be like whack-a-mole, right? Like musical chairs,
and not the fun kind of whack-a-mole and musical chairs. That's the type of game you don't want to get into.
Exactly. So that's where this thing could fall apart. Now, I think that these guys have the talent, and we certainly know that between Harold Goodwin and Joe Gilbert, they have the coaching. The problem is, this is not the Matrix. This is not Neo. You can't just stick a little plug in the back of their head and download everything and have them go out there and do all the little flying kicks and whatnot, right? And have
dodging bullets and things like
Mr.
that.
Anderson, be Neo, right? So I think this is where it could unravel. I think they've got enough bodies there that they're going to find one, but that's how it could unravel. And I think that's the biggest issue, because that's up front, and it involves the running game up front and the pass protection for Brady, as you mentioned.
Yeah, it's a little bit of a domino effect where, sure, it might immediately impact the run, but of course it affects Tom Brady. And Brady, of course, I think has helped this offensive line since he's gotten here with the way that he gets rid of the ball quickly, and just the fact that he can read a defense and almost immediately be like, okay, I'm going to the slot receiver on this play or whatever it may be. So he obviously helps the offensive line in that stature. And I'm not overly concerned about the offensive line. I just want to make that clear to the readers and viewers and listeners that this is just like worst case scenario. What if this doesn't happen? Because I don't think we could just all across the board, every position, expect like 100% A plus, play throughout it. But let me ask you this, Scott, because I think we talked a lot about the run game here. The ideas of offenses in general, it obviously through analytics and the way the game has evolved and the way that the rules have been structured, there's no denying it's much more of a passing game than it was even 5 years ago, 10 years ago.
Right.
And there's different degrees of thoughts when it comes to the run game itself. The John Ledyards and the Paul Atwalls of the world would be totally fine if no team ever ran the football ever again entirely.
Yes. And really the running back position was abolished and just outlawed.
Yes. Yeah. It becomes obsolete like the home telephone. No one needs a home telephone anymore. Everyone's got a cell phone.
Which is a wrong approach, by the way. But they're not here to defend themselves.
Yeah. I think the other side of it and I think you fall on this a little bit more. And I'll just speak for myself. I don't think the running game is as important as it once was, but I
Right.
still think there is room for it in today's NFL. And I think sometimes too, you see it from time to time each season. A team will just go on a run where they rack off like 2 or 3 first downs just running the ball.
Right.
And I think there's really something positive to be said about just manhandling the other team where they know and you know that they know
Yeah.
that they're just going to keep running the ball and there's nothing that you can do. You
Yeah.
can't stop it. One of the things that
It's
really sticks out to me was well, two things. I mean, if you look at that Bucs Jets game early,
Mhm.
especially in that first half, the Jets were doing that to the Bucs, and it was
Right.
like almost embarrassing. But the other
Oh,
game that
yeah.
really sticks out to me, it's not even a Bucs game. It was Patriots Bills. It was a primetime
That's
game, so it
right.
was either Thursday night, Sunday night, Monday night. But it was that game in
I think it
Buffalo
was Sunday
where
night. Yeah.
where it was extremely windy. The
Yeah.
Patriots attempted one pass. The Bills passed a little bit more because Josh Allen has that rocket arm. But the Patriots
Right.
won that game running the ball
Yeah,
time
dude.
after time after
Threw
time.
threw the
And
ball
I
3
enjoyed
times.
that.
Yeah.
I enjoyed that. I don't
Sure.
know, some of the younger fans may not, but I
Right.
just think it brings a little bit of old school
Well,
football that is necessary to teams.
yeah, and the thing is, Matt, is it's hard to throw the ball in the wind. It just is, right?
Well,
You can
yeah.
have a rocket arm. The ball's going to sail, or it's going to, if you're throwing into the wind and you're trying to throw, a deep 40-yard pass, or like even a 30-yard deep out, and you don't put enough oomph behind it, it ends up being 20 yards. It's underthrown, and now it's a pick six. And so, yeah, especially as it gets deeper into the season, or if you have inclement weather early in the season, right? I mean, we've seen that here in Tampa sometimes. It's still the
Yep.
thunderstorm season in the month of September and sometimes October. So, yeah, that's a very valid point. And I think that with the running game, it's still demoralizing to not be able to stop the run. The easiest
Great
thing
word.
to do in the NFL is to turn around and hand the ball off. And when it's working and you can't stop it, it's game over because
Yep.
the attrition kicks in. You get physically worn down. You can't rush the passer, and I think that's the thing too. Is when you look at running the ball, and we'll stuck on this for a second because it's you've hit a hot spot with me here talking about the running game is against the Rams. Right, the Bucs could not run the ball against the Rams either time. I think Fournette had 2 touchdowns. He ran for 50 yards, but they ran for, I think, 30 yards in the first game, and Brady back in week 3 had 13 of those yards, the
Yeah,
leading
that's
rusher.
right.
So the problem is when you can't run the ball when you want to run the ball, then you're playing into a team like the Rams where they've got a guy like Jalen Ramsey who can pick off passes, and they've got guys that can get to the quarterback. Von Miller last year, Aaron Donald and Leonard Floyd. Then you get a tee-off situation where they just pin their ears back and they keep coming. But if you can establish the run, what you're doing is if you can establish it early, you're wearing down the pass rushers. The easiest thing for a defensive lineman to do is rush the passer, is to get a one-on-one, beat their guy, go upfield and do that. Because in pass protection, the offensive linemen are essentially going backwards. They're creating a pocket. So the defensive linemen have the momentum when you're rushing the passer. That's just physics. But when you're talking about the running game, now all of a sudden you're trying to run forward and the offensive lineman in front of you is running forward, and now you have a collision. And if you're getting double teamed and pass protection, that's one thing. It doesn't burn as much energy as it does when you're trying to anchor your gap and you got a center guard combo on you and your ass is getting kicked and moved out of the hole, right? And you're getting planted on the ground. That burns energy. And listen, Simeon Rice is the most athletic player in the NFL I've ever covered. But aside from him, and even he got tired on occasion, aside from him, a game is like a tank of gas. You start off at F, and by the end of the game, you're close to E in terms of energy, in terms of your fuel. So if you want to be able to rush the passer in the fourth quarter, and you got to deal with the running game all 3 quarters, you're not going to have as much in the tank. But if you can't run the ball, and you've been rushing the passer for all 4 quarters like the Rams did, game over. And I think That's where the Buccaneers have got to be able to run the ball when they want to. And I think that's an obstacle they have to overcome as well.
Yeah, I think that became a little bit of an issue. Again, the Bucs are a very talented team, so to a degree, we're nitpicking here slightly. But for example, I look at that game against the Bills that the Bucs won in overtime. But remember, they
Yeah.
had a huge lead,
Right.
and the game should have never went to overtime. The way that the Bucs were playing in that first half. And
Right.
Bruce Arians has said before, and of course, this is Todd Bowles' team now, but Bruce always said, like, we want to pass early, build a lead, and then we want to run the ball, sustain
Yeah.
the clock, and go
Sounds
and win
good.
the game. And the Bucs didn't necessarily do that. There's another good point from Charlie.
Mhm.
He was talking about the Packers. He said the fact that the Packers can't run the ball in January is their biggest downfall
That's
year after
yeah.
year. That's a fact. And also, listen, in a perfect world, Bucs get the number 1 seed, Super Bowl goes through Tampa. But
Right.
as we saw when the Bucs won the
Mhm.
Super Bowl, they had to go to Green Bay in January when
Right.
it's really cold there. The weather, the elements is a huge part of it. Where in those type of games, physicality matters a little bit more than
Yeah, it
finesse
does.
and strategy and everything along those lines. So I think it's very apparent that the Bucs have to run the ball efficiently this year. They don't have to do
Yeah.
it all the time. It doesn't have to be 50-50. That's a way of the past.
Mhm.
You don't have to have extreme balance, but you have to
Right.
be effective when you decide to do that. I want to stick on the opponents this year because I think
Yeah.
another fun thing about this overall topic is that it's all encompassing. We'll talk
Mhm.
about specific players, we'll talk about specific positions as we just did
Right.
with the offensive line. But another thing that could really affect the Bucs and impact them are multiple teams, but 2 in particular that have been a thorn in the Bucs side. Of course, that's the Rams, as you were just talking about, and the New Orleans Saints. And I also think on top of that, another really important thing is just that first month of the schedule where they
Yeah.
play the Cowboys, the Saints, the Chiefs, and the Packers. Chiefs, tough opponent in the AFC, but
Right.
again, because there's only 1 seed, tiebreaker is going to be decided
Yeah.
potentially in that first month.
Right.
Dallas obviously lost some players, and the Packers lost, or they no longer have Devontae Adams. Still difficult opponents where you want to make sure you have that tiebreaker right away.
Yeah.
And of course, they play the Rams later in the season. And I thought
Well,
it was
and
yeah.
Matt
Go ahead.
last year, I mean, they lucked out on the
Yes.
tiebreaker because the 49ers went into LA and beat the Rams, right? I mean, nobody
Yeah.
expected that. The Bucs are watching that game in their locker room, and the 49ers prevail with the upset. All of a sudden, the Buccaneers have the number 2 seed, right, over the Rams.
Yeah.
And so I agree with you. I think that one of the things this stuck out to me was if you go back to 2019 and Bruce Arians' first season in Tampa,
Mm.
they didn't get up to a great start. They put themselves in position to make a playoff run late in the year, and they were 7-7 at one point. They lost their last couple games because Jameis Winston just was way too generous with the ball. He was already in the holiday spirit, giving
Season
out
of giving.
presents.
Yeah.
Yeah, right. Season of giving, and the Bucs just didn't have enough weapons because of injuries, hamstring injuries to Godwin, Miller, and Evans. But what he said was we shouldn't have been in this position where we're fighting and clawing to get in the playoffs in December. Your playoff run starts in September. You got to win early. It's so much easier to get an early lead and keep it than it is to try to dig yourself out of a hole and then catch up at the end of the season.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think to that point, well, it's a little bit different, but a player that was on that team was Donovan Smith, who obviously was on our show yesterday. And he really had a great point. This is more specifically talking about the Rams and the Saints, who the
Mhm.
Bucs have had a lot of trouble beating. But he essentially said, and I would recommend to everyone to check out yesterday's show if you haven't yet,
Yeah, great
where he
show,
said
Donovan.
that it's not even the opponent that they're playing.
Mhm.
It just happened to be the Saints and the Rams, but they kind of look at these teams and they get in their own head. And
Yeah,
we've said it. This is before Brady got here, but for the longest time, and even early with Brady, not specifically him, but the team, we've long said, even with Jameis, that a lot of the times it's just the Bucs beating the Bucs. It's not
yeah,
even the fact that the other team had a better game plan, and sometimes
right.
that was the case with the Rams, but for the most of the time, like, the Bucs are so
Yeah,
talented, it just came down to those turnovers and getting in their own heads,
that's
and
right.
that's continued even with Tom Brady. That's continued specifically with the Rams and the Saints for whatever reason it may be. And I'll be honest, Scott, like that first game against the Saints, or the
Yeah.
first time they go to New Orleans,
Mhm.
I'm probably going to pick the Saints against the Bucs
Yeah.
because
Show me you can beat him.
I'm
Show me
done.
you can beat him before I'm gonna pick you.
I'm done just saying, well, it's Tom Brady and he's the greatest of all
Right.
time. And they got Brady's number that one time. He'll figure it out. He'll
he's 0-4 against the
Yeah.
Saints in Tampa. So
Oh, yeah, 0-4 and 1-5. They won the big one.
yeah,
We
he
have
won
to
the one
give that
in the regular
disclaimer.
season. He
Yes.
hasn't won. And
Exactly.
you're right, Matt. And yet and to kind of dovetail on your point there, and it hasn't really bid him. It hasn't cost him yet. They have lucked out.
Yeah.
When it comes to the chump teams. And listen, I don't want to disparage teams. Okay, I'm going to disparage some teams.
Do it up.
but the thing is I know in the NFL, and you can talk to Donovan Smith, you can talk to D. Delaney, who's actually going to be on the podcast tomorrow.
That's right.
D. Delaney, Bucs cornerback, OTA star of training camp last year. Actually got a couple starts last year in his first season in the NFL because there was all these injuries at cornerback, right? So we'll have D. Delaney on to talk about that and other topics. But the point I was going to mention is there's always a couple of games, right? And you go back to 2020, it was the Bears game.
Mhm.
Losing against teams that you have no business losing to. And last year was the Washington football team, right? That was an ugly loss. Matt, they pulled out the Jets game by the skin of their teeth. You and I actually had a chance to meet Robert Saleh, the Jets coach, at the NFL owners meeting, and great guy, like
awesome guy.
I mean, I think you feel better being a Jets fan now, right? That you met such a good guy. He's a good dude. Like
very nice guy, very gracious with this time at an event where there are
talking to us.
The cream of the crop of people that are in the NFL that are there. Yeah, we spoke with him for.
We don't even cover the Jets. I mean, that's the thing. Is I was like, hey, we cover the Buccaneers, not the Jets. I mean, you're giving out a lot of this time, but the thing is he even said he said we should have beat you guys, right? And like, I mean, up until 28 seconds left.
The QB sneak by Zach Wilson changed everything because I mean, why on earth they QB sneaked it on 4th and essentially 2? It was 4th and 1, but it was like a very long one. Yeah, the Jets bailed out the Bucs in that game. It could be a very different story.
Right. And so there's always that game. The Washington football team lost last year. And, and again, the reason why I'm bringing this up now is because you mentioned that the Saints as one of those teams that just, has the Bucs number. I mean, holy smokes, man. They lost to the Saints 9-0 at home. The Bucs ran the ball in that game. They couldn't get a turnover, I don't think, to save their life. Brady lost pretty much all of his weapons in that game. Yeah. It was a massacre. And Taysom Hill was the quarterback, and didn't even have Jameis. It was a fluky game, but the thing is they lost. They lost a game they had no business losing, and I think that for the Buccaneers, again, it hasn't bit them yet because they won the Super Bowl in 2020 despite losing to the Bears. They ended up going 13-4 last year, including 8-2, despite losing to the really bad Saints team 9-0 and that Washington football team loss. But at some point in time, you lose to the Rams, okay, right? You lose to the Packers or the Chiefs. I mean, shake hands. Hey, you got the best of us. You got it, right? But man, you can't lose to the chump teams on the schedule. Not that there's many this year, but like, for example, you can't go over to Germany and lose to the Seahawks.
Yeah, you absolutely cannot have that. And it's weird because you mentioned that Bears
game. And by God, you better beat the Falcons twice and the Panthers twice too.
Yeah, there are no excuses for that. I don't give a crap. I almost said a worse word there, but I don't care if it's Baker, if it's Sam Darnold, whoever the hell it is. Like, yeah, you have to sweep those 4 games between those two opponents. And, you mentioned that Bears game from 2 years ago. You mentioned the loss that they had to Washington. In a weird way, it almost felt like those 2 losses like kind of woke them up after that. Maybe not necessarily the Bears one because they went on that losing streak a little bit later when they lost to the Chiefs and teams like that. But again, like Chiefs, tougher opponent. It's almost like taking smelling salts. It's like they lose that game to the team that they shouldn't lose to,
Right.
and then they're like, "Oh, okay, got to focus, like ready to go."
No,
They
it's
should
a great
already
point.
be. They should already be ahead of that. Like they should already know. Okay, yes, we can beat this team, but you can't slack off. You can't, take a break in preparation for this week. It's, college
And
football, we talk about trap games. NFL, same thing.
You're right, and especially this year. I mean, this schedule is stacked, right? Like
Hardly any breaks.
Yeah, they're not going to go undefeated, right? I mean, that's a given the schedule, and you're going to take some losses. You're going to lose to some good teams, right? That's just the NFL. There's parity, etc. The Bucs, again, best record in franchise history, was still 13-4. They lost 4 games, right? So they're going to lose some games, but you got to lose against quality opponents. You can't roll into Carolina or Atlanta or I don't think Cleveland's going to be that good for some reason, or like Pittsburgh, for example, the Mitch Trubisky at quarterback. You can't go in and stub your toe against those type of teams. That's one thing I hope Todd Bowles can really rid this team of, is some of those ugly losses, like that Bears game in 2020 and the Washington football team lost last year.
Yeah, you can win ugly.
Or I guess they're the Commodes now.
Yes, the Commodes, the Commodores, whatever they are. For the most part this season, the Bucs will be the favorite. Maybe against the Rams or one of those other teams, they could be the underdog. And speaking of underdog, the best place to go and draft your teams is at Underdog Fantasy. Guys, start drafting your teams. You got Best Ball Mania 3 going on right now. You could start setting up your leagues with your other friends or family. They have smaller buy-ins as well in other leagues and tournaments. And the pick'em's very fun too. Underdog Fantasy is the easiest way to get some action in the NFL with putting some wagers on games. Just pick an over-under on your favorite or at least favorite player stats, and you can win up to 20 times your money in a single night. Underdog keeps it super simple with their easy-to-use website and mobile apps. Pick between 2 and 5 players to fill out your pick'em slip, get every pick right, and take home some cold, hard cash. Use the code Pewter and get your first deposit doubled up to $100 by Underdog. There's, of course, the Best Ball Mania 3, but, of course, football season is around the corner. They got other things going on right now. You could bet on golf. They got the Pup Cup going on, and that closes on August 8th. So you still got a little bit of time there. You pick a PGA Best Ball draft tournament for the FedEx Cup. FedEx Cup is a very fun tournament in the PGA where the winner gets a boatload of cash. It's over $1 million. It's a $5 entry and $100,000 in total prizes, and first place gets $75,000. There's also the Puppy too. So a little bit different than the Best Ball Mania. The Puppy, obviously a little play on Underdog. Yep. That is a tournament style thing where you can pick your team. And the cool thing is you could do 12-person groups, 18. There's 115 as well. And it's, again, tournament style. So there's 4 different rounds. The fun thing, though, is you can decide to pick either a fast draft or a slow draft. So, if you're in a rush or you just kind of want to get it going, get it moving, pick that fast draft. You can go and get it done, quicker than your typical fantasy football draft. If you want to do a slow draft, you could take your time. Maybe you're deciding between 2 players. You don't know which one you want. Look up, their stats against certain teams or their opponents that they're playing against this season. Right. You look up the opponent's defenses. So you got your different options there, all at Underdog Fantasy. And, of course, the promo code is Pewter. And Pewter Report, of course, will also be drafting a team as we get closer to the season. So keep on the lookout for that and see if you could beat us picking fantasy teams.
Agreed. I was just up in Washington, D.C. I got family in the Northern Virginia area, and they're just miffed at the Commanders, man. I'm telling you. It's like they still use the term Redskins. Oh, yeah. Like diehard Redskins fans, they still call them Redskins. Like not even – like they were even saying the Washington football team was better than the Commanders. It's just stupid and silly. And this is funny, too, right now. Should be referred to as the Washington Subpoenas. So at least with my family, I said, well, I call them the Commodes, and they thought that was good. So maybe that name will catch on up there instead.
I just want to say the Washington football team, it grew on me a little bit. Like at first when they were like, Washington football team, it was kind of
Right.
like, all right, that's silly, that's stupid.
Yeah.
But for whatever
I
reason,
agree.
I kind of got used to it and was just fine with it. I agree with Common Sense. Say Red
Yeah.
Wolves.
That was
I
cool.
thought that one was good. I thought
Yeah.
that could have been doable for sure.
Yeah. And the thing too, the other one that I thought was really good was the Warhogs. You just have like kind of a menacing, warthog on there, kind of like the Arkansas Razorbacks. Like come up with like a
Yeah,
little different design
because they
there.
already do the hog thing anyway,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, it goes back to the glory days, the Joe Gibbs 1980s Redskins teams that had the Hogs, right? That was their offensive line, Joe Jacoby and
Yeah,
and all of the offensive linemen. They could have picked better. Let's just say that it's
agreed.
it's not good, not good. So and we had on the cover graphic Lavonte David. Now, why is that a Bucs biggest obstacle? Well, Matt and I talked about at the beginning of the show. You can't control injuries, but one of the things that really concerns me, Matt, is the Buccaneers are waiting for two players to come back, and when they come back, they got to come back and be their old selves. One of those guys is Lavonte David, and he's been nursing that foot injury. It's like a Liz Frank injury that was kind of severe, kept him out of some games towards the end of the season. He came back for the playoffs, was not the same guy, admitted that. And Matt, he said that the lack of sacks, the lack of tackles for loss, it really bothered him. And I think he's 31 now. So
Around that.
Lavonte, yeah, he's in a contract year. I'm fine with Lavonte David doing what Rondé Barber did at the end of his career, which is sign a 1-year deal, sign another 1-year deal, keep playing at a good level, sign another 1-year deal, right? I mean, I think that was one thing that Mark Dominic did that was really smart is take Rondé on a year-by-year basis. And I think once Rondé was like 42 or 43, he finally retired, after playing like 30 years for the Buccaneers, et cetera. And I think that's the approach the Bucs should take with Lavonte David. Don't do a multi-year extension after this year. If he plays well and earns it, give him a 1-year deal. I mean, listen, if it worked for Ndamukong Suh, if it worked for Rob Gronkowski, it can work for Lavonte David too. But Lavonte's got to come back. He's got to come back from that foot injury and pick off some passes, be that splashy turnover machine that he usually is, because he wasn't that guy last year, right? I think that the Lavonte has got to come back and be Lavonte, and because we saw what life was like without Lavonte. Period. When Devin White was in there next to Kevin Minter, that was not a scary. I shouldn't say that was not a
match made in heaven.
Sight. Yeah. It was a scary scene, right? I mean, that Jets game, the Panthers game, etc.
Yeah, absolutely. Lavonte at his full strength and at his best, Lavonte can make up for the mistakes that other teammates around him are committing. He can protect some of those guys. I don't think it's the other way around where Devin White can kind of play Superman, Batman, whoever your favorite superhero is, and kind of take the place for other miscommunications and other things that are going on. And on top of that, as you mentioned, issues with Kevin Minter when he was playing. He's obviously not on the team anymore for the moment. We'll see what happens before training camp. But there's a huge question mark behind Lavonte David and Devin White. I think we're all optimistic, as are the coaches, as is Devin White talking about someone like KJ Britt. And we love Grant Stewart on special teams, but as an inside linebacker, completely different type of football game there. It's on Devin White because there's a giant gap at the linebacker position after Lavonte and Devin White. I would maybe trust KJ Britt in a situation where he's playing week 17 and the division's already locked up and they can't move up in seeding anymore. I would be interested in seeing that, but not against the Ravens on Thursday Night Football.
Oh yeah, for sure. Right. Yeah. I would trust KJ Britt after KJ Britt has a really, really strong preseason. Right. Yes. It shows me, then I'll trust him. But he's one of those guys right now that you have to, I got to see it before I believe it. Right. And so the other guy too, that just based upon his importance to this team that has to come back from injury and just be that guy is Chris Godwin. right?
Yes.
I mean, you can't have Chris Godwin come back, even if he's cleared to play against the Cowboys on opening day, or whether it's a game or two after that. When Chris Godwin comes back, he can't just be a guy that catches 60, 70 passes for 800 yards and a pair of touchdowns. He's got to be dynamic, right? And not just because the Bucs are paying him $20 million per year now. I mean, Matt, that would be nice, right? If he came back and really earned that paycheck, right?
Mhm.
But the thing is with Tom Brady's potential last year in Tampa, they need him to be dynamic. And sometimes, and we've talked about it before in the podcast, it bears repeating. Sometimes when you get back from injury, you have what's called a get back season, right?
Yep.
I got back, I overcame it, but sometimes it takes another year for you to get back to the level that you were at before. In other words, you were medically cleared to play, you went out there and did it. Maybe it was a mental block. Maybe it just, you didn't trust it. Maybe it just took a little bit more time, right? From a physical standpoint, you lost a half step, whatever. And then you kind of get that back the next year. The Bucs can't really afford to wait because Tom Brady is only signed for this year. That Super Bowl window is only open probably for this year, Matt. So Chris Godwin, it's not just about the money. He's got to come back, and he's got to be Chris Godwin, that dynamic guy that is going to lead this team in targets, catches, and probably yards as well. Mike Evans will get the touchdowns, right? He's a 13, 14 touchdown guy.
He's got that on lock. Yeah.
Right. But Chris Godwin's he's the straw that stirs the drink in this offense.
That's obviously a huge concern. And my thought process really behind that, and it kind of plays into what we were talking about before with the sense of that first month of the schedule is extremely tough for the seeding with the opponents. I'm looking at it more as, and this is just my opinion, we're not going to get that Chris Godwin for the first month. I'm not saying by the time October and November get here, we can get the Chris Godwin that we all know and love. That's why my concern specifically is, again, not even really with Russell Gage. I know we talked a lot about Gage and his role in this offense, but it's really who's going to play the Russell Gage position for that first month of the season, who's going to win that wide receiver 4, who will be the wide receiver 3 for, in my opinion, the first month of the season when Godwin is trying to regain his form. Because if the Bucs don't figure out that situation, and again, remember, multiple players were put in that situation, whether it was Tyler Johnson got the first crack at it and really didn't live up to it. I'm not 100% giving up on him, but clearly they can't get the same production that he was giving the Bucs last season. Rashad Perryman, again, outside of the play against Buffalo, didn't give the production that they need, especially on third down. That's really for
the
me,
thing too. I mean,
really
look at the separation right here by Tyler Johnson.
Now.
I mean, that's as good as it gets, right?
That's a tough one, and that's why I am a little bit optimistic about Jalen Darden and Cyril Grayson Jr. Obviously, because Cyril Grayson obviously did do it for a very, very small sample size, but he was productive, of course, in the Panthers game and the Jets game. And Jalen Darden, I know people get frustrated with his abilities in the return game. I don't feel Darden totally got an opportunity to have the role that Tyler Johnson and Rashad Perryman did. He got a little bit of playing time in the Rams game, and he got garbage time snaps, when they demolished the Panthers late in the season. So can Tyler Johnson step up? Yeah, I think the talent and the ability is still there. I'm not overly confident on it. I wouldn't necessarily, give a ringing endorsement for it. But they're going to need someone, because if they got the same production from that number 3 wide receiver, again, with Russell Gage being the number 2 for that first month, and Godwin will be involved, but I think they'll put him a little bit on a pitch count where the other receivers are going to get more playing time than they normally would if Godwin was fully healthy. I just really think they can't afford, with the schedule that they have that first month, they cannot afford to have the type of play that they got from those receivers in that loss to the Saints, and especially in that game against the Rams where their season ended in the playoffs.
I agree. And so really what it is, just to kind of come full circle, we talked about they got a lot of bodies at left guard, right? They got a lot of bodies at wide receiver. They essentially have 10 guys competing for 3 or 4 spots.
Yes.
They have 13 wide receivers in the roster. We know Evans, Godwin, Russell Gage, those are the locks. So take them out of the equation. Now you're left with 10 wide receivers vying for roster spots, 4, 5, 6, maybe 7, depending on special teams, etc. So it's one of those things that they have to guess right. They have to, if they're going to roll Tyler Johnson out there as wide receiver 4, which will default to number 3 if Chris Godwin doesn't go at the start of the season, or maybe that's Perryman or Darden or whoever it is. That person's got to deliver right from the get-go, because Dallas Cowboys, New Orleans Saints, Green Bay Packers, Kansas City Chiefs, right? So you've got a lot of tough opponents right out of the gate, and they can't sit there and okay, well, Darden's not getting open. All right, well, come on, let's get him open. Tyler Johnson's not separating, right? So the guys that are out there, right, they got to do their job, and they got to really stand and deliver right away. Otherwise, Tom Brady holds onto the ball. He gets sacked, right? I mean, it's a domino effect. So I'm with you on that, Matt.
I want to switch gears here a little bit, talk about the defensive side of the ball. I think we spent a lot of time on the offense. You did talk about the secondary earlier. But the next point I'm going to make, it's a little bit twofold, where one is about Todd Bowles specifically as a defensive play caller. This doesn't have too much to do with this offensive, with his head coaching ability or what he'll bring to the team this year. But the first guy I actually want to talk about, and I'll get to Todd Bowles in a moment, that would be Joe Tryon-Shoyinka.
Yeah.
And this goes to what I was talking about at the beginning of the show. And I just want to say I'm not overly concerned about JTS. This is, again, worst case scenario type of thing. The Bucs are putting a lot of trust in Joe Tryon-Shoyinka to be that elite level pass rusher that they hope that they're getting when they drafted Joe Tryon-Shoyinka. Do I think that he can become that? Yeah, absolutely. And because he's done a lot of great stuff. But what if he doesn't, take that next step? What if he doesn't develop as quickly as we all would like him to?
Yeah.
And we saw it with from a lack of production standpoint, we saw it with JPP. And I understand he was injured, but it was just okay, if Shaq doesn't get the quarterback, it doesn't feel like JPP is. And I know Joe Tryon-Shoyinka played in all 17 games, had a couple of starts, had those 4 sacks. But it feels like to me, if Joe Tryon-Shoyinka had another 4-sack season, and he's going to get a lot more starts, I would view that as a disappointment. I think Joe Tryon-Shoyinka really has to put his stamp on this defense. And
you're right. You mentioned JPP. And at times, Matt, when he was on the field, it's like the Bucs defense is playing with 10, not 11.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
And so JTS is going to get singled up more than likely. I think they're going to play him on the left side, though, Matt.
Yeah.
And so I think naturally he's going to be going up against tight ends and, having the back on that side to chip. He's going to be against right tackles. And I think that's going to free up Shaq Barrett to be on the right side, rushing the quarterback's blind side. I think that's where he had most of his 19.5 sacks, most of his 6 forced fumbles in 2019, that Pro Bowl season where he led the NFL in sacks. I think that's how they're trying to set this up. Because if they don't, and they put JTS one-on-one with the left tackle, and Shaq's getting double teamed, and he's the proven guy, right? He's the proven commodity getting to the quarterback. Then you're putting JTS in a one-on-one situation against the most athletic offensive lineman, and maybe he wins, but if he doesn't, then there's not much pass rush.
It's going to be a lot of this is going to be on JTS winning those one-on-one battles, and I think he will do that for the majority. I'm just, talking about the opposite effect here, or the upside down for those that are fans of Stranger Things. And the Bucs also had the luxury last year when JPP was playing injured or underperforming. They could go to Joe Tryon-Shoyinka and be like, okay, we have this backup plan. JTS, go do your thing.
Yeah.
Now that he is the starter, if he doesn't live up to the hype or the capabilities that we expect of him, yes, there's Anthony Nelson, and he's a solid backup. I really like Anthony Nelson as a backup. Yeah. I don't love the idea of Anthony Nelson as an everyday starter for a majority of the season.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Starts here and there. Sure, injuries happen. I totally get it.
Yeah.
That's where a veteran presence at outside linebacker, I think, would be really helpful for the Bucs. Again, that insurance policy, JTS still needs a little bit more time to develop. But that leads me to my next point with Todd Bowles, because if everything that I just talked about, if it's not working out for the Bucs, that means they're not getting to the quarterback outside of Shaq Barrett, and we'll see how much the interior defensive line it brings to the table. But that means Todd Bowles is going to dial up a lot of blitzes, and he already does, and that's fine. You know, that's his calling card. That's what he does. I don't think he should necessarily change that. But if he has to dial up blitzes even more, one of the most frustrating things that we saw from the Bucs last year is when they're sending the blitz, it's the coverage that they played with this, you know, tissue paper soft coverage, couple yards off the line of scrimmage, let the quarterback dink and duck, and get down the field.
Man, I thought you were talking about when Devin White runs right by the quarterback. I thought that was going to be the most disappointing thing.
Well, if Devin can clean that up, then, you know, that would go a long way. But a lot of times last year, we got really mad at the soft coverage that they would play. Because I understand they don't want to give up the big play.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, exactly. And it would still be for 5 yards. It's like, all right, well, a 5-yard gain, unless it's 3rd and 10, you know, getting 5 yards on like a first down play because teams don't run the ball against the Bucs in the first place. Right. That's kind of a win for the offense. Yeah. So I'm a little concerned that the Bucs get into that pattern again. Mm-hmm. And I trust Todd Bowles overall, but that would be something that concerns me that would prevent the Bucs from winning a Super Bowl this year.
For sure. Speaking of concern, Lord King 83 says, who's actually concerned Dallas's defense is going to be improved from last season? Sorry, I've got some landscapers here mowing the grass, opportune time during the podcast. Yeah. But he says Dallas defense is going to be improved from last season, and week 1 will be tough. Well, here's the thing. Remember the narrative last year, Matt. Week 1, Dak Prescott coming off the leg injury, right? And then he hurts the shoulder in training camp, and the dude goes out and throws for 400 yards and just slings the ball over the place. Nobody saw that coming, right? Week 1 is week 1. It is buckle up, hold on to something. It's a wild ride. You see upsets in week 1. Remember the Saints
Packers.
Winston, 5 touchdowns against the Packers. Packers just did not show up that game whatsoever. Another one. The last time the Buccaneers beat the Saints in the regular season, Ryan Fitzpatrick was the quarterback. He comes out and throws for 400 yards. They beat the Saints in a shootout, 48-41, I think, was the score of that game. So anything goes in week 1. So I would not take any part of the Dallas Cowboys lightly, just because there's a bit of an X factor there. And to be quite frank with you, the Buccaneers did have some turnovers in that game, but for week 1 with a brand new Dan Quinn defense, they didn't play that bad. They were pretty opportunistic on the defensive side, causing some of those takeaways. That's what kept Dallas in the game. Even though their defense wasn't tightened up yet under Dan Quinn, that was a much better defense week 1 for the Cowboys under Dan Quinn than it was the previous year.
You're absolutely right. And, you know, the first week of the season is the most unpredictable, but it's also the first time, unless you want to do the preseason, the first time that you could start betting on football and specifically the NFL. And if you're going to bet over-unders or, money lines or anything like that, the best place to go and do that is with mybookie.ag. And I understand, sports is still, NFL is still a little bit around the corner, but you still got baseball, the All-Star games tonight. You have golf tournaments all the time. There's a big UFC fight this Saturday, which is very exciting. So there's still a lot of things to go and bet on at MyBookie. There's parlays, there's prop bets, there's, all different types of things to do. Some of my favorite parlays is you take the money line of one game, the over of another game, and, the spread of a favorite another. Nice little 3-team parlay, see if that hits. Also very fun to do like a 1:00 game, a 4:00 game, and Sunday night football as well. But use the promo code Pewter to sign up with MyBookie, and they will match your deposit up to $1,000. They will match half that deposit. So you bet, you put in $1,000, they'll give you $500 free dollars that you can go and bet on. So
damn, man, that's
pretty damn good. Put in bet responsibly, of course, but put in a nice little parlay with that free money. And if you win, more free money. If you lose, no big deal. It doesn't come out of your account because it's a bonus money right there. So use the promo code Pewter and bet away with mybookie.ag.
Speaking of bonus, we got some bonus Buccaneers this week. We had Donovan Smith, left tackle for your Tampa Bay Buccaneers on Monday. Tomorrow, we got another Buccaneer, cornerback D. Delaney. We had quite the offseason. We had Rashad White on. We had Cyril Grayson on, Will Golston. So we've had 5 Buccaneers on in the last 2 months. We'll have some more hopefully during training camp as well. Try to schedule some of those with the team. speaking of Rashad White, we can break the news that the training camp diaries for Pewter Report are back. If you don't remember those, or if you're new to Pewter Report, we do these every single year, except for the last 2 years because of COVID restrictions. We couldn't get near the players to do the interviews. Everything was via Zoom. So we're back to open locker room this year. We're back to talking to the players face to face. It was awesome having a 30-minute sit down with Blaine Gabbert right before the end of summer. That pretty much made my summer. It was fantastic. Great interview. I'm going to be putting that in a Fab 5 in August. Really interesting guy. Quite the handsome fella, too. Best looking quarterback in the quarterback room. Sorry, Tom Brady, but you're number 2. But so we've got our Bucs training camp diaries coming back this year. Already got approved by the team. We talked to the players. Rashad White will be the offensive player, and we always get an offensive player and a defensive player. We get a rookie and we get a veteran, just to give our readers some insight from different perspectives, from a guy that's been around the block to a brand new rookie, and then one guy on defense and one guy on offense. Sometimes it's a defensive rookie and an offensive veteran. Other times, like this year, it's an offensive rookie and a defensive veteran. So Rashad White, who was on the podcast a couple of weeks ago, will be doing the Bucs training camp diaries with us on pewterreport.com. So we'll interview him about once a week, get his perspective. He's going to be talking straight to you guys out there, you awesome Pewter people. On defensive side, very interesting guy, Patrick O'Connor. Pat O'Connor, otherwise known as POC.
Tupac on Instagram.
Tupac, yeah, exactly. Yeah. And he's an interesting guy because he's a great story, right? He's not a lock to make the roster every year, but he's worked his way from being a practice squad guy to becoming an integral part of the Bucs special teams. Got a sack last year, part of that rotation, coming off of a knee injury, re-signed with the team this year. So he's going to give some great perspective, not just on Logan Hall and Akeem Hicks, the new Buccaneers up front, but also the offensive lineman like Luke Gadecki he's facing, right, in practice every day. And he'll also have that crossover appeal to where he can really talk about special teams too. That's an area this unit, this phase of the Buccaneers has to improve. So Pat O'Connor and Rashad White will be our Bucs camp diary guys. And Pat's a great quote too. So you're going to learn a lot about these guys and about Bucs football only on pewterreport.com. And make sure that you are following along with all the action on the Pewter Report podcast. We're going to throw up our schedule for, not vomit our schedule, but I'm going to put up our schedule so you could see it here, because it's going to change. It's going to change now. We're not doing the Monday through Thursday things because pretty much when the Bucs have a practice, we're doing a podcast 4 times a week. But make sure you subscribe to our Pewter Report TV channel on YouTube. And Matt, click the notification button. Why is that important?
Because it lets you know every time that we drop some new piece of information, whether it's, these YouTube podcasts, whether it's, clips talking about, all the topics that we discuss on the show, whether it's press conferences and all the different types of videos that come out of the Advent Health Center, the Bucs training facility. The most newsworthy type of things we will put on our YouTube channel. All the different clips that we have. We got some Donovan Smith clips that will be coming up over the next couple of days from our interview with Donovan, which was fantastic. And listen, I understand. I love these podcasts. They're great. They go for an hour. I understand that not everyone can sit down for an entire hour and watch this show. You want to get to the specific parts. You want to get to Donovan Smith talking about that left guard competition, or who he's most looking forward to, facing as an edge rusher, or should he be in the Pro Bowl and All-Pro consideration. We'll put those videos so you can get straight and to the point. So by subscribing to Pewter Report TV, it just lets you know when we put out a new video. There's no cost, there's no charge, just giving you a heads up.
It's free to hit the subscription button, and then it's also free to hit the notification button. And folks, when you do, you're going to be alerted to our ever-changing podcast schedule like we have coming up. So next Monday, we're going to have D. Delaney on tomorrow, then a Thursday podcast. That's normal. Then we kind of switch it up. First week of camp, Monday, it's going to be a camp preview show. Then training camp starts Wednesday, July 27th. all these shows are at 4:00 Eastern, so that's the good part. We're staying on schedule there. But Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday podcasts next week. The following week, the Buccaneers have Thursday off, so we will have podcast Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Friday. So just about every single practice, we're going to have a podcast thereafter. So make sure that you subscribe to Pewter Report TV, hit like on all of our videos, and click notifications, and that will keep you posted on all of the Pewter Report podcasts.
Yes, it will. And everyone get ready for tomorrow. Myself and JC will be on speaking to Bucs cornerback D. Delaney.
Yeah. I feel really good about the show tomorrow, Matt. I mean, this was the best Pewter Report podcast we've done. That was the goal we set out to do. We talked about the Bucs obstacles. We nailed it. And thanks to you, Pewter people, for tuning in and your great comments and questions. We nailed it. But I got a feeling tomorrow, this D. Delaney interview, probably going to be the best Pewter Report podcast we've done.
It, without question, will be. It's always awesome when we get a player on. It makes for all the ingredients, the perfect recipe to have the greatest episode of all time. So for Scott Reynolds, I'm Matt Matera saying thank you, everyone, for watching and listening. And we will see you tomorrow with D. Delaney for another edition of the Pewter Report podcast. Out.